No, Andy Kotelnicki is not going to leave Penn State for Oklahoma's offensive coordinator job, but that also doesn't guarantee that he's going to stay in Happy Valley for another season either.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch. Every single day we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. A big board was released for Oklahoma's potential replacements at offensive coordinator, and Andy Kotelnicki was one of the first names thrown out there. I thought that was interesting because I see this of having 1%, 0% chance of happening. The odds of this actually going through are just down. It's not going to happen. Andy Kotelnicki is not going to make a lateral move. So we'll talk about that. Plus Big Noon Kickoff. Is Penn State looking past Wisconsin to Ohio State? And KJ Winston, Keon Wylie, Zuriah Fisher, key defenders who have not been available for Penn State's defense this season. Andy Kotelnicki to Oklahoma is not going to happen because I look at this and say the next step for Andy Kotelnicki, and frankly the people that write about Oklahoma too agree with this, that it's a long shot simply because Andy Kotelnicki is not going to make a lateral move. Why would he make a lateral move? He's succeeded everywhere that he's been. The MAC Conference, Group 5 with Buffalo, and for a long time too. Then at Kansas. The Big 12, where Oklahoma was up until this season. They're now in the SEC, but Andy Kotelnicki proved that he can do it against a school like Oklahoma at Kansas. And now in the Big 10, and sorry SEC fans, but the Big 10 and the SEC are either on the same level, or I would argue that the Big 10 just might be better than the SEC this season. It helps when you add, both sides added two top schools across the country, but I'd say the Big 10 is actually better to the SEC than the SEC at this point. That's a different debate and a discussion here. So Kotelnicki doesn't need to make this move because I think he's proven everything to this point about who he is as a coach, as an offensive coordinator, a leader of young men. So Kotelnicki doesn't have to make this move to prove himself. Oklahoma doesn't really offer anything outside of what Penn State is offering in terms of pedigree, prestige, and doing it against a top level of competition. He's bringing his offense over to the Big 10, and it's working. And it's working against schools that were in the Pac-12 too, right, with USC. So across the board, Andy Kotelnicki has proven that he is better. It is beneath him to make a lateral move regardless of the school. He's going to take a head coaching job. And that's why I say that, okay, it's not a guarantee just because he passes up on Oklahoma that he stays in Happy Valley past this season either. I don't know anything as far as, well, Kotelnicki's definitely going to do that. I can't make that judgment now. But it's very plausible that a Group 5, maybe even a Power 4 school, is going to call Andy Kotelnicki and say, hey, we want you to be our head coach, or at least interview. There is no doubt in my mind that Andy Kotelnicki will get interviewed this offseason for potential head coaching jobs. But why doesn't it make sense to have a lateral move? Let's entertain the idea that maybe the SEC is better here in this case, or just that Oklahoma is a better offensive coordinator job than Penn State. Well, you're going to have to outbid Penn State. And ironically enough, Oklahoma was in the running for Andy Kotelnicki last offseason. So if he really wanted to be in Norman, I think he would have taken the job for this 2024 season and not gone with Penn State. Just a fact. And then you're going to have to outbid Penn State, which is not afraid to spend money anymore on its football program. Pat Kraft is paying current Andy Kotelnicki $1.6 million over a 4-year span with incremental increases throughout his tenure. Is Oklahoma really prepared to break out the checkbook and do just that, get into a bidding war and potentially spend what, 1.7, 1.8, up to $2 million for an offensive coordinator? Penn State might be prepared to get into that bidding war as well if they really want to keep Kotelnicki to this point. That's why I think this conversation's a waste of time unless we're talking head coaching jobs. So let's talk head coaching jobs. Andy Kotelnicki doesn't have any head coaching experience, right? But that doesn't mean there's not going to be a school that's at Power 4, Group 5 definitely, but at the Power 4 level that might take a chance on him. I've seen West Virginia suggest that, or suggested. Maybe that's just over presumptuous West Virginia fans who are just tired of a Neil Brown and have seen, hey, a little bit of jealousy, right? But also seeing like, okay, Andy Kotelnicki's working at Penn State. He seems to be just a really good coach across the board. Can he actually lead a program? West Virginia at least makes sense from that standpoint if they're looking to make a change from Neil Brown. I don't know. I don't cover West Virginia, but that one's been suggested. It's interesting though, because he doesn't have any head coaching experience, as I've mentioned. So he needs to go build that, right? He needs to be able to prove at a lower level program that he can do it. Maybe. But what about Mississippi State? Mississippi State's interesting because they hired Oklahoma's former offensive coordinator to be its head coach, and he had no true head coaching experience. It's not like he was at a smaller program beforehand or went from Oklahoma to Group 5 school to Mississippi State. No, Mississippi State, an SEC school, took a chance on him as a 40-year-old head coach with no head coaching experience. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. In this day and age, you kind of have to take those kinds of gambles. Andy Kotelnicki's also not just going to accept whatever head coaching job comes his way. If Kent State were to reach out to him, and I'm sorry, Joe Moorhead, I don't mean to just kind of, throw a stray at Joe Moorhead, but Akron or something like that, a low-level school that hasn't produced results. Andy Kotelnicki he can pick. He can choose what school he ultimately goes to and becomes the next head coach at, because he needs to also be set up for success as well. He just takes whatever head coaching job is available. That is going to ruin the upward trajectory of his career. So Kotelnicki basically holds all the cards in this case. Going to be comfortable at Penn State. He's going to continue to work with the quarterbacks that he has right after Drew Aller. Bo Pribula's there. Ethan Grunkmeyer's there. It's not a dire situation. And he's set up financially very well. But for him to bring it all together, he's not going to leave Penn State for Oklahoma for a lateral move, because you don't drop into Penn State for 1 year. You don't uproot your family. You don't move them across the country to Pennsylvania, an area that you're not really familiar with. He spent a lot of his time in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. I look to those areas, but Wisconsin doesn't have any availability. If Minnesota were to fire PJ Fleck, I would absolutely keep an eye on that one. I think Minnesota would make sense for an Andy Kotelnicki, but the chances of that happening are also little to none. Andy Kotelnicki is being compensated very well by Penn State. That's a good sign. Like I said, the only thing that is holding Penn State back is a head coaching job that sets him up for success and would give him a significant raise, because head coaches make in the neighborhood of $3, $4, $5 million. How could you turn that down when you're Andy Kotelnicki, who is looking to become a head coach in the future, is looking to run his own program, call the shots, in addition to, continuing to support his family, his wife, his children? That is the only reason that he would leave Penn State after one season, is to get a head coaching job at a sustainable program where he's going to see a significant pay increase. Probably not something, even if Oklahoma were to outbid Penn State, hypothetically $1.8 million to say $1.7 million. Do you really want to uproot your life for $100? And it's relative, right? $100,000 to me is different to Andy Kotelnicki. Besides the point, I don't know that Andy Kotelnicki would do that unless it is, and from what I've gathered, he's very content at Penn State overall. Something we're not content about: Fox Big Noon Kickoff strikes again and takes Penn State versus Ohio State. We all know that, but Fox can't help itself, and there's a reason for that not enough people are talking about, but we will talk about it on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Now, here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and then you'll feel your best tomorrow. Now, here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. You pace yourself, you hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Then step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they're going to refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to ZBiotics.com/LockedOnCollege. Use promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. And today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And yes, you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform out there with an injury insurance policy. So your lineups will stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, PrizePicks will keep your lineup in play. It will stay alive. Do you think Saquon Barkley is going to go over 85 rushing yards? Do you think George Pickens is going to go over 55 receiving yards? You can cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use promo code LockedOnCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app. Use promo code LockedOnCollege and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is PrizePicks. Run your game. Everybody likes to dunk on Fox here, but there's an explanation why they chose Penn State versus Ohio State. And they can't help themselves. They're a business. They have to make money. So there was an interesting explanation here, because when I looked at that weekend slate of games, Michigan and Oregon was on the slate as well. And there's different factors here that I'm going to bring up. And I don't mean to get political when I say this or anything like that, because politics are involved here. It is election season. It's an election year. We go to vote in the first week of November, and Penn State and Ohio State are the state schools of 2 very important swing states. So that's okay. I don't need to debate that in politics, Pennsylvania and Ohio, as far as battleground states go. But when Fox looks at this, they don't look at it as, okay, how can we ruin the whiteout? They look at this as, and that's what I mean when I say they can't get out of their own way. The reason they have Big Noon Kickoff and they've gone all in on Big Noon Kickoff, what other games are being played at noon that are like, you know what, I gotta watch this? No, all of the eyeballs that are available for that noon slate are going to be on Penn State versus Ohio State. And then you factor in all the political ad buys that they're going to get. And this was explained by Joel Klatt, pointed out to me on X, that they're going to make so much ad revenue. When it comes to Oregon and Michigan, I thought, okay, that's a high profile matchup, but Michigan's not as good this year. It doesn't matter. They're going to get so much advertising revenue because it is a political season, because there are so many political ads that can be run between Pennsylvania and Ohio. That's part of other than the fact that, yes, it is a high profile game. But Fox knew all along. Here's the part of the other way. Here's the other part of this. They can't get out of their own way. They are locked in to that noon kickoff spot. Fox cannot have 3:30 games. Fox cannot have 7:30 games. The only other game that they can have is that 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11. I guess it depends. But the late night kickoff for USC versus Washington, right? That's the way the TV contract is set up. So Fox really kind of hindered themselves here. They hurt themselves by saying, okay, we'll take noon kickoff and then we'll take the late night kickoff as well. Because everybody says, oh, Fox can just put it at 7:30. Why don't they put it at 7:30? Because it's not that simple. It's not that simple. NBC is locked into the 7:30 slot. So they get the big time, prime time Saturday night game in the Big Ten. CBS is locked into the 3:30 slot. That's the way it goes. That's a TV contract. I didn't negotiate it, but understand, this is what I want people to take away, is that Fox picked Penn State and Ohio State because they are going to get the most, not only viewers, but ad buys. And that all translates to dollars. And There is not another high-profile noon kickoff game that is going to compete with Penn State, Ohio State. All the available eyes for TV sets for college football will be on Penn State versus Ohio State unless you hate Penn State or Ohio State, or you have an allegiance to another school that's playing. Let's be honest. There is not another game during that weekend that and I'll say trumps because he is going to be in attendance at that game, that trumps Penn State versus Ohio State. In that, there's not another high-profile matchup there in that case. Oregon and Michigan are going to be 3:30 and so on and so forth, okay? And then aside from that, Fox is married to Big Noon Kickoff. They can't schedule games at 3:30. They can't schedule games at 7:30. They can only schedule them again at 10:30, 11 o'clock. So maybe, just maybe, they'll schedule what? They'll schedule Penn State, Ohio State at 10 o'clock? Absolutely not. That would never happen. So Fox has no choice. They are committed to Big Noon Kickoff for the next, I think, there's 5 years left in this TV contract? There's 5 years left in this TV. I think NBC makes out very well because they get the 7:30 primetime game, but ESPN, ABC, right? They schedule all the games whenever they feel like it, the primetime games. It's just kind of, it's Fox versus ABC, it's SEC versus Big Ten across the board. There's more to it than that. Let's actually talk about this Penn State Ohio State game because I've seen people who support Wisconsin, people in the comments say, well, Penn State's not going to take Wisconsin as seriously because Ohio State is on the horizon. And that's a fair argument. That has absolutely crossed my mind. I don't doubt that they're not thinking about Penn State. Penn State isn't thinking about Ohio State, but in years past, Ohio State, it dictated the season. Penn State, the 14 college football playoff, that was the big game, right? It was just Ohio State and Michigan. You got to either win one or both. So that's all Penn State was focused on, absolutely. So them looking past Wisconsin doesn't make sense this time around because losing to Ohio State doesn't jeopardize your season because there are no longer 4 playoff spots. There's 11. Yes, there are 12, but that Group 5 team gets in as that 12th team, essentially. Penn State doesn't have to put all of its chips into Ohio State. Absolutely. Would they like to win the first game for what? It's been almost 10 years. They haven't won since 2016. Absolutely. And Penn State's not going to get to play Ohio State again until 2026, but they're not looking past Wisconsin simply for that reason. Maybe I would argue for that if Ohio State was a win against Ohio State or a loss was going to make or break Penn State's season. But now that you can get into the college football playoff by beating all the other teams that you're better than, and yes, Penn State's better than Wisconsin. So if Ohio State is hypothetically better than Penn State, you go 11-1. It's really hard to see how even with the remaining schedule, is not as strong as it is. Washington, Minnesota, Maryland, Purdue, those aren't juggernauts. Those aren't top 20, top 15 teams. That part of the schedule is easy for Penn State. That's just easier. It's tough to win in college football, but those aren't the most difficult opponents that they could play. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Michigan, right? They played USC. Wisconsin's a fair opponent. Minnesota's a fair opponent on the road. I think Washington is going to be peaking at that time. I digress from that. But Ohio State, unlike years past, does not make or break Penn State's opportunity to get into the college football playoff. So some people might be looking ahead to the Buckeyes because, Penn State looks at that as a rivalry. Ohio State might not, but it doesn't make or break the season. And that's where I'll leave it at that. Injuries. KJ Winston was addressed in James Franklin's injuries. James Franklin addressed KJ Winston and his injury situation directly, and that got me thinking, okay, well, what about Keon Wylie? What about Zuriah Fisher? Can we expect any of them back this season? Some positive news for one, maybe not so good news for the others. We'll talk about that on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. And even better, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's all it takes. You can turn your first $5 bet into $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. And that's at FanDuel.com. And if you look at FanDuel.com, the lines are available for Penn State versus Wisconsin. If you are interested in that game, Penn State is a 6.5-point favorite, minus 235 on the money line. We've seen some movement back and forth. Wisconsin is plus 195 on the money line. Total is set at 47.5. Remember, that is a 7:30 kickoff for Saturday. If you like those lines, you can bet them all right now over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And today's episode is also brought to you by Home Field Apparel. Hey, football fans, fall is here. And that means one thing: college football is back, and it's better than ever. And to make sure you're ready, we've partnered with Home Field, the exclusive apparel sponsor of our show, to bring you their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. Home Field is the go-to for premium collegiate apparel. I bought some myself because it's crafted with comfort in mind, featuring vintage designs that'll make you the envy of any tailgate. And with over 180 schools to choose from, including Penn State, there's something for each and every fan. But the real MVP is the Home Field Platinum Football Box, which I bought as well. This is your all-access pass to exclusive gear for the 2024 season with 3 never-before-seen items from your school. Plus, VIPs will get even more. You get a special hat and a 2024 Platinum Pass for early access and discounts all season long. So don't wait. Head over to homefieldapparel.com and gear up today. And we got a promo code for you. We are 24. That is we are 24 at checkout, and you will get 15% off your order. Again, that is promo code we are 24. That is homefieldapparel.com. Let's make this season unforgettable. KJ Winston, Keon Wylie, Zuriah Fisher, 3 impact players on the defensive side of the football that have, for the most part, not been available all season long. KJ Winston playing against West Virginia. From what I gathered, sustained an injury against that West Virginia team, went into the Bowling Green game, aggravated that injury, and now he's actually not with the team. So I'll be transparent here. I didn't know what KJ Winston's situation was because James Franklin has different terminology, and now it's changed. It was different last season in 2023, and now in 2024 it's short term, long term, and that can mean whatever he wants it to mean. Long term can translate to what? 6 weeks, 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. KJ Winston coming back for the final game of the season, a hypothetical playoff game, the Big Ten Conference Championship, right? That kind of seemed like the timeline there with long term, if you will. But if so James Franklin actually admitted, I'm surprised that he said this, was that he actually, and he's going off of anytime he discloses information about an injury, it's because he's confirmed with the player and the player's family about how he's going to talk about the injury. So he said that he and Anthony Poindexter went and visited KJ Winston and his family. I find that very intriguing that Winston is actually away from the football team. There's also a separate interview where Zach Seyko talked about how, KJ Winston's not with the team, and just it really wasn't an answer that he wanted to give. So if somebody's away from the team, that's not good news. That is not good news at all. I would imagine that if you were with the team, constantly studying the playbook, being a veteran leader, and I'm not trying to criticize KJ Winston here. James Franklin said that the focus is for him to get healthy. Maybe there's an optimistic outlook where, hey, if everything goes right with whatever he's dealing with, I don't even know the extent of the injury. I don't even know what it is. I've asked people, they don't even know what it is. But KJ Winston is not available. He's not with the team presently, and he's working to get healthy. That communicates to me that there's little to no chance that he returns this season, and that is a shame because he is arguably one of Penn State's best overall players. He is in the conversation with Singleton, with Aller, with Abdul Carter, KJ Winston. I think those 4 players, that's that first tier of elite players on this team. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody else, but those were the first 4 players at the beginning of the preseason that are like, okay, these are your most talented guys on this Penn State football team. And all the signs point to Winston not being available for the remainder of the season. Again, if he'd be there, he'd be essentially a player's coach, studying the playbook, rehabbing, ready to go so that he could join the team at any point in time once his rehabilitation is complete. That it's never say never, but it does not look good. For Zuriah Fisher and Keon Wylie, it seems like there is an expectation that they will return. I have a little more optimism for a Keon Wylie as opposed to a Zuriah Fisher, but those are two players that could return very late in the season. Big Ten championship potentially, right? If everything goes well for Penn State, they win the games that they're supposed to. They hold some tiebreakers. If you go 12-0, it solves everything. You're in the Big Ten championship. Easier said than done. However, about Zuriah Fisher and Keon Wylie. Keon Wylie was spotted at the practice field. So I say at the practice field. He wasn't on it. He wasn't practicing, but he's around, and there's no lingering signs of something egregious, an egregious injury. And James Franklin admitted when he was asked about it that, yes, we do expect Keon Wylie to hopefully come back. Okay, so that's good news, especially since Penn State could use some more linebacker depth, especially when it matters most in playoff time, right? We're thinking about college football playoffs. Keon Wylie would be a huge boost to the depth, and he's actually talented. He's not just a body. He is a really good player who I was eager to see if he could have a breakout season if he was available. Zuriah Fisher is a workout rehab warrior. I will never, because Zuriah Fisher, when he was injured the first time around, he worked his way back, rehabbed through as much as possible, and got back on the football field well before anybody had projected him to, expected him to. I don't know how his rehab is going this time around, but there is a possibility that Fisher could be back this season. Again, I won't rule anything, make any judgments here, but Zuriah Fisher does work hard. He was injured in spring ball. It sounds like it's a serious knee injury, so maybe he is available late November, early December, when Penn State is going to make that playoff push. They need linebackers. They need defensive ends. So all the help they can get is going to be appreciated one way or another. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Remember, Penn State plays at Wisconsin, 7:30 kickoff. We'll have a live halftime update show. We'll also have a live post-game show here on the Locked On Nittany Lions YouTube channel. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. If you're not already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel to keep up with your favorite Penn State sports teams, football, men's basketball, wrestling. We cover it all here on the show. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section about Andy Kotelnicki, about Fox, about Ohio State, early Ohio State thoughts, and the defenders that have been missing but could come back this season. Really appreciate it. And thanks again so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. He talks about everything that is Big Ten related. Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, all the newcomers from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten, everything that is Big Ten related, you will get it on Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.